Quality education must focus on learners, health, nourishment, their capacity or ability to participate in learning, but always supported by their families. Gospel truth about this, I think. Those who are studying education have often emphasized that the key to success is the support that we all give to our young ones. Environments that are healthy, also gender sensitive. You are hearing these stories. Very difficult to explain about toilets for girl child and so on. Environment and dropping out of primary school, secondary school because facilities are not conducive. Content, curriculum. What does it contain? Basic skills, literacy, numeracy, life skills, health itself, nutrition, these days HIV/AIDS, and peace, that elusive commodity which the Vice Rector talked about. Education for peace. Trained teachers. You have trained teachers who know how to communicate with the children in well-managed classrooms, skillful at assessing them, facilitating learning, etc., etc. And in these studies, you often hear of untrained teachers, teachers who are just moving into classrooms sometimes without any training, sometimes even no aids. And finally, you are talking about outcomes. You have to measure somehow. You set out to achieve this goal. What have you actually achieved or not achieved? That is my understanding of quality education, and I'm not claiming authenticity for it. This is UNICEF, and you know UNICEF and its credentials in this area. My profession, bullet number 1 there, stresses mastery of language, because you will use language in the courts to persuade a judge that the man you think is a thief is actually a perfect citizen in his favor. Then he is a perfect citizen, because that's what the law is. Language. Start with the spelling. When I was in year 1 at law school, my first essay was all red. I thought the lecturer was thinking about where I was coming from, not really being fair to me. It was all red. Wrong punctuation. The I's, T's I did correctly, but construction of sentences, no good. You must get it right. The question is, have we borrowed a leaf from this? Because these days, the applications you see, even at my lodge, you don't want to look at them. The English is bad, the spelling is bad, the certificate is bad quite often. I don't know. Elocution, how to speak, articulation, proper emphasis here, proper emphasis. and above all, hard work, attention to detail. A case can be lost simply because you used the word and instead of the word all. A whole case. And a judge in a judgment would go to town, 50 pages, just splitting hairs there and saying, well, it's not the all, it's the and therefore the implications is this and that and that. Attention to detail. And look at Henry Ford. He was quoted by Mr. Kajaj in the last presentation. The man who has a larger capacity for work and thought is the man who is bound to succeed. My own professor, Lord Megare, at the bar, was perhaps one such example of hard work. Megare published the reigning textbook on what we call real property. 1,356 pages of closely detailed exposition. Megare was also lecturing to bar students. Megare was also a practitioner. He died in 2006. Very respectable judge. And his catchphrase was, earn your money. Work hard, because that's the only way to earn your money. And so it was with a number of professors. Of course, I'll come to another quality that was emphasized to us: handle money honestly, or not at all. If you see a barrister's gown, the proper barrister's gown, some of these I think we import from South Africa. They don't train barristers there. There is a pocket at the end. Barristers never handled money, never argued or wanted to be paid money. But if you thought that the barrister was arguing your case correctly and powerfully and impressively, then you jumped and slotted a little coin on the left. The left was smaller inside because it was for little pennies, but silver, guineas, and the like, it was a bigger pocket. You saw it at the back. I'm quoting now Section 65 of the Malawi Constitution, so that you know. The Speaker shall declare vacant any member of the National Assembly who was at that time a member of one political party, blah, blah, blah. You have to go to details. What do you mean, Speaker? If the Speaker is not there, can someone else do that job in his place? Deputy Speaker, for example. Shall, what do you mean by shall? It's obligatory. Voluntarily ceased. What do you mean voluntarily ceased to be a member of a political party? Or has joined an association. What do you mean by association which is political in nature? I was a member of the Pan-African Parliament. And a clever member of a ruling party said, oh, Chimango has crossed the floor because he's joined an association whose objects are political in nature. I said, oh, my dear me. You know? So we have to argue these things. And this case about the Speaker shall, actually we had a problem. Before I was appointed Speaker, I am the one who was drafting the complaint. This is not known to anybody outside. I was drafting the complaint for the party. Now I become Speaker. Am I going to be invoking this when before maybe I was involved, although in earlier stages of the case? Very tricky situations. I have no time to go into the details of this, but sometimes we are misunderstood, as this next quotation suggests. Because when you go into that house, and it's a constitutionally constituted house, the Constitution establishes Parliament, and you make laws. Outside sometimes doesn't understand us, as did the voice of Mika. This is a Catholic magazine that said, the second bullet in the footnote, Parliament is a house of politicians and not lawyers. Therefore, what we need to be doing is to be guided by decision-making processes that are political. Therefore, even MPs who are deemed to have crossed the floor would have done better by resigning if indeed they are honorable. Now, two things there. You are saying it's a political office or political house, but it's a house of lawmakers. And the Speaker is the #1 lawmaker. You want him to be the #1 lawbreaker? And my answer was, no way. Hang me. I will not break the Constitution or not break the law. I'll go strictly by the law, which means really a lot of learning, case law from Commonwealth, etc., examination of the petitions that were presented, etc., etc. And I stand my ground, stand or fall by it. I cannot be moved, and I think also the voice of Mika have accepted that perhaps they overshot. Now, I'm running out of time, so I will not go into details, but if there are questions on the law, you are welcome. I've given you a reference of the article on crossing the floor, or the so-called defections in Parliament, Malawi Law Journal of November 2012. I'll go to the last example of case studies that I would like you to consider, and that is the social anthropologist. Big name there, Bronislaw Malinowski. I think he's German or Polish. Did a lot of research in Australia among the Aborigines. Professor Jeff Holleman, #2, there appears to have been 2 Hollemans. Wrote a textbook on Shona customary law in Zimbabwe, but from a point of view of a social anthropologist. They all ended up at Leiden University, and I met them there, at least the second Holleman. And of course, Jomo Kenyatta. Isn't it nice to have been a social anthropologist and to be writing about facing Mount Kenya, trouble life of the Kikuyu? We call them Kikuyus, which have referenced below. The important thing that one should know is that Kenyatta studied under Malinowski. Kenyatta studied land and practiced consulting with his communities on land matters. And then he wrote in 1938, Facing Mount Kenya, which is now in its 6th or 7th edition, published now by a different person. The index, you see tribal origins. That's what it covers. Where do the Kikuyu or Kikuyus come from? Actually, they came from Congo, like the Chivas. So these things, the world is indeed round. Their land tenure, very important issue. economy, industry, ceremonies, sex among young people. I don't know why people want to study that, but that's their business. Government, worship, magic, education. This is where we are interested. From birth to death, because I want to draw lessons from that. Customs, especially concerning moral code, and how to be valuable to society. Very important, what Kenyatta calls purposeful learning. I'll just read some things that I sort of picked from that book summary. I didn't read the whole book, but on education, and I would like, if you may, please to consider these bullets following very seriously, because I think that's where our problem may have been. If you are fighting corruption, for example, emphasis is placed on development of mannerism in Gikuyu society, in one's place in the family, in the clan, in society, respect and obedience to various levels of authority. As you grow, what happens during circumcision, rites or rituals attendant to marriages and marriage processes, death ceremonies, very important. Quite often we're woken up by a telephone and it's a death message, isn't it? Education cannot be indifferent to such things. We have to face them. They matter in society, in a country. Emphasis is also placed on consequences of losing honor. If you misbehave, what will so and so think? It does not pay to bring dishonor. The whole organization of the community, reinforcing the lesson that behavior toward other persons is what matters. That there is always a social reference, not just to the individual in play. In other words, if I steal, it's not just a matter of Chimango the thief. It's one Twagunkoma Kuba. That's what anthropologists teach us through analysis of what they call native societies, meaning you and mine. I don't mind that. Personal relations, not just acquisition of knowledge. It's not just a question of freedom of thought, but how you relate with or to others. The result is that one develops a sense of mutual obligation and responsibility in fellow workers, in the community, and in one's own state. You belong to a state. It's not irrelevant to the state that I steal. Whatever change may take place in men, the court reads, one will still have mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, children, blood relations, neighbors, companions, fellow workers. The vital thing is that the sense of mutual obligation and responsibility is found in existing relations, and that this should be continued. I don't know, I'm going very fast now, but I hope you can see some sense in what I'm trying to present. According to the social anthropologists, education is not just arithmetic, that. It's also behavior through the process. If you observe the methodology of anthropologists, capturing, as they say, what the natives say and do, following closely, studying, recording, and reporting about how they bring up their people, how, in a sense, they are educating them. Mannerism is important. Community relations are important. And your sense of belonging is important. Without that, you have nothing. There is nothing. There is, in fact, no education. That is the case. The organic whole enables communities, therefore, to be organized or galvanized into common efforts to develop, cultivate each other's gardens, for example, harvesting, digging trenches, building roofs. These are communally done. But the key to it is your or one's sense of relationship with the community, the relation that the community has with the individual. This is emphasized in the education of traditional societies. My case is that perhaps, and I've studied the anti-corruption battle in Malawi. My case is that perhaps that's where we've missed it. We don't seem to have any relationship with. It doesn't matter what I do. In fact, you brag around until you are chased in the shops. I think that is the problem. I will not talk about Kawisa, but I wanted also the audience to know that some of these studies had a bearing in our own legal history. Definitely the Kawisa case or Chilogwe murder case in 1968. The details you may find in my manual and also in Hansard. It's 1968. Recently, Didi Piri, whom I very much respect, said it was 1978. I think that was a mistake. 1968, people dying in Blanta, 39 of them, and someone comes into court, the traditional court, and says, I did it alone. Those people who are in prison, they should be released because I did it alone. And the judge, the traditional chief, says, I am convinced beyond reasonable ground or doubt that he did it alone. And Kamuzu said, no way, because there is national opprobrium. There is a national jeering cry saying, muntu mozi 39 yeka wina wafuna kwaika kumbuyo, no way. This actually explains the whole background of the traditional courts not count in Malawi. I will not worry you with the wills and inheritance thing, and therefore I should go towards concluding. I suggest that perhaps we should go back to the drawing board and establish well-resourced chairs and programs of indigenous knowledge for teaching beyond the existing traditional medicine research program of the University of Malawi, to unify and strengthen linkages of existing traditional heritage foundations, to reorient research, and then there will be expected outcomes. I'm actually saying, please, Professor Kanyamapiri, Chefu, Professor Seani Mulako, Professor Boston Soko, Ngoni, advisor to Chief Mbero, perhaps we are missing something. We are not just Ngonis, because above us, we are Malawians. Malawi is bigger than Chewa. We are not just Malawians either. Africa is bigger than Malawi. Nay, we are not just Africans, we are humanity, and humanity is bigger than Africa. Knowledge so gained, I'm sure, is what will enrich us, etc., etc. I'm sure will help us also combat some of the evils, or indeed to reach the goals that we set out for ourselves. I talk about translation because you see the translations. I have been reading J.W. Gwengwe's Kukula Ndi Mwambo. Gwengwe comes from 3 kilometers from my home in Homa. I can't understand what Chichewa is talking about. I can't read it. I think we have to, it's Chichewa to impress whites, I think. And I thought that that is not good enough. It should be authentic Chichewa that anybody, Jim and Jack, can understand, as you will understand the Malawi Constitution in Chichewa, which I had the privilege of leading the team to translate. And then dissemination of those matters, the personalities, including, of course, copyright, very big issue. Intellectual property rights must be observed, etc., etc. And finally, and apologies, there is no conclusion, because my case is and has been that this matter is for more interrogation. But I must be tempted to talk about the 4th R, because I think that is the gap in our education setting. We talk about arithmetic, writing. What's the other one? Reading. The 4th R. What about religion? Respect. For what will it save a man if he gains all the world but lose his soul? I ask. And I quote Matthew 16 verses 29 at the very end. When I say I, what does it mean? What is the I in me? Yes, it's the spiritual I in heaven. What about here on earth? When people say you, what is the you in them? I suggest that that's so crucial because it's a matter of honor. The other day, Vice President retired Justin Malawi said, you know, the one thing I cherish is just the honor, the honorable. If you remove honorable from my name, I feel disappointed, I feel lost, I feel worthless. It's important. Isn't it worth therefore keeping that honor, that integrity? Why have we thrown integrity to the dogs? Why have we thrown away God? Or religion, because there have been in some curricula of secondary schools, there is no religion for the IGSC exams. Can you imagine that? Are you surprised, therefore, if behind the scenes the kids are weeding around whatever? Integrity. Prayer. I'm not a reverend, but at the National Prayer Breakfast in the US, when the whole world runs away from you and you are alone, you and your God, as Eisenhower says, Dwight Eisenhower in 1953, the White House is perhaps the loneliest place in the world. You are alone. Friends run away when there are problems. You may even hear of conspiracies to murder you. I faced those things. At that time, you realize that if you are strong enough, I can do without kotu. I can do without that, because above me there is one who is strong and omnipotent. That is the basis of the National Prayer Breakfast. I realized that perhaps is sometimes missing. And within a day, 24 hours, assisted by Mr. Nyondo in Area 10, we were able to hand out over 200 Bibles to members of Parliament, which they accepted with a lot of enthusiasm. Most finally, I set an agenda for what I call senior citizens, because idleness leads into all sorts of problems. You had this letter from Karonga of a senior citizen talking about land issues, very important issues, issues which must be resolved in Malawi, in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in Kenya. And Kenya, the home of Kenyatta of all places, has authored 2 very serious cases. Eldoret case, which went to the Human Rights Commission of Africa. They lost. The Human Rights Commission said, give these people their land, give them their honor, give them their human right. That right includes right to access to a livelihood. That was not enough. And on 26th of last month, another case, the home of Kenyatta of all places, which reference I've given also. Ojet case, something like that. This time to the African Court for Justice and Human Rights. Again telling Kenya government, give those people their land. Don't talk about environmental protection and forestation and the like without listening to the people and doing fairness to them. Now, the story about move of Dzaleka, for example, to Karonga, it's a government policy, yes. The people have their own responses, yes. How are we handling it? It's a big issue. How are we tackling the land? It's a big issue. The only question I have is, in communicating and conveying these concerns, where is respect? Where is our respect for ourselves, for others, for the state, for presidency? I may not like a particular person, but that's an office. You saw the opening of or the Queen's speech today in Parliament, you know, perfect. They are really saying we are above everything else, British. That's our Queen. You may disagree on anything, on Brexit, whatever. But old Britannia reigns. The Union Jack. When will the Malawi flag compel us to run around and say, Kiwis Malawiana sum? I am a Malawian citizen above everything else, like they used to say in the days of the Roman Empire. I wish you well. I thank you. Thank you for your patience.